Jack and the Beanstalk, the sun hung low over the horizon, casting an orange glow over the small village nestled at the foot of the hills. Jack, a thin, scrappy boy of 16, trudged along the dusty path leading to his family's modest home. His bare feet kicked up small clouds of dust, and his patched trousers flapped against his legs. Life had not been kind to Jack or his widowed mother. Their tiny cottage, built from worn wooden planks and thatched with straw, stood at the edge of the village, almost forgotten by the world. Inside, Jack's mother sat near the hearth, her hands trembling as she tried to patch an old shirt. The lines on her face were deep, etched by years of hardship. "Jack," she said, looking up as he entered, "we have no food left. No money. We can't go on like this." Jack dropped his sack of foraged berries on the table, his face a mix of frustration and sorrow. "I'll find work tomorrow, Mother. I'll go to Farmer Tibbs' fields. He might need help." His mother shook her head. "You've tried, Jack. No one wants to hire a boy with no skills. We have only one choice left." She hesitated, her voice cracking. "We must sell Milky." Jack's heart sank. Milky, their cow, was more than just a source of milk. She was a companion, a constant in their uncertain lives. "Sell Milky? She's all we have left." "We have no choice," his mother replied firmly. "Take her to the market tomorrow and see what you can get. Maybe enough for some food and seeds to plant." That night, Jack lay awake on the lumpy straw mattress he called a bed. The room was dark except for the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the cracks in the wooden walls. He stared at the ceiling, his mind a storm of thoughts. How had it come to this? His father's death years ago had left them with nothing but debt, and every effort Jack had made to support his mother seemed to crumble before it began. The next morning, he tied a makeshift rope around Milky's neck and began the slow walk to the village market. Milky plodded beside him, her soft brown eyes trusting and unaware of her fate. Jack avoided looking at her too much. It hurt too much to think about losing her. The market was bustling with activity, filled with the shouts of traders hawking their goods and the chatter of villagers haggling over prices. Jack felt out of place in his ragged clothes and unkempt hair. As he led Milky through the crowded streets, he caught the curious stares of villagers who whispered behind his back, "Look, it's Jack the dreamer. Poor boy. Always talking about adventures and nonsense when he can't even keep his family fed." Jack clenched his fists but said nothing. He had learned long ago that arguing with them would do no good. He focused on finding a buyer for Milky, though each step felt heavier than the last. He stood near the edge of the market, unsure of whom to approach. A strange man appeared seemingly out of nowhere. He was tall and thin, with a long coat that shimmered slightly in the sunlight. His eyes sparkled with an intensity that made Jack uneasy. "That's a fine cow you've got there," the man said, his voice smooth and inviting. "How much are you asking?" Jack hesitated. I was hoping for enough to buy food and seeds for planting." The man smiled, his teeth gleaming. "Food and seeds, eh? How about something far better?" Jack blinked in confusion as the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch. He opened it to reveal 5 tiny beans, each one shimmering with an otherworldly light. "Magic beans," the man said, his voice lowering as if sharing a great secret. "Plant these, and they'll grow into something beyond your wildest dreams." Jack frowned, unsure whether to laugh or walk away. "Magic beans? That sounds like a trick," the man chuckled. A trick? Oh no, boy. These beans hold a power you can't even imagine. And I'll give them to you in exchange for your cow. What do you say? Jack looked down at Milky, her soft eyes meeting his. He thought of his mother, of the empty shelves in their cottage, of the endless cycle of despair. What if the man was telling the truth? What if these beans really were magic? All right, Jack said, his voice trembling. I'll take the beans. The man grinned and handed over the pouch. A wise choice, my boy. A very wise choice. With that, he took Milky's rope and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Jack standing alone with the pouch in his hand. When Jack returned home, his mother was waiting anxiously by the door. Her face fell when she saw his empty hands. Where's the money, Jack? What did you get for Milky? Jack held up the pouch, his heart sinking as he saw the disbelief and anger on her face. Magic beans, he said weakly. They're supposed. 2 magic beans? His mother shouted, her voice rising with fury. You sold our cow for this nonsense. How could you, Jack? How could you be so foolish? Before Jack could explain, she snatched the pouch from his hand and threw it out the window. We needed food, Jack. Not some childish fantasy. Jack said nothing as his mother stormed into the house, her sobs echoing through the small cottage. He stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where the beans had landed in the dirt outside. A cold wind blew through the yard, carrying with it a strange, faint whisper that seemed to come from nowhere. As night fell, Jack lay in bed, staring at the ceiling once again. He felt the weight of his mother's disappointment like a stone in his chest. Maybe she's right, he thought. Maybe I really am a fool. But outside, in the patch of earth where the beans had been thrown, the ground began to stir. Jack woke the next morning to the sound of his mother moving about the house, the clatter of pots and pans echoing in the quiet dawn. The tension from the previous night hung heavy in the air. He hesitated, lying in bed a moment longer, dreading the day ahead, but something was different. A strange green light filtered through the cracks in the wooden shutters. It was faint but unmistakable, casting an eerie glow across the room. Jack frowned and sat up. Mother, he called out. Outside, she replied sharply. Her tone was clipped, her anger still evident. Jack stepped out of the cottage and froze. His jaw dropped as his eyes traveled upward. There, towering over their tiny home, was the most incredible thing he had ever seen. A massive, spiraling stalk of green shot up into the sky, its base rooted firmly in the very spot where his mother had thrown the beans. Thick vines wrapped around the stalk, dotted with enormous leaves that shimmered in the morning sunlight. The stalk seemed endless, vanishing into the clouds far above. His mother stood a few feet away, staring at it with a mix of awe and disbelief. What is that? She whispered. Jack approached the beanstalk, his heart racing. He reached out and touched one of the vines. It was warm under his fingers, as if alive. The faint whisper he had heard the night before seemed louder now, almost like a voice calling to him. It's from the beans, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother turned to him, her expression unreadable. This is what you got for Milky? Jack nodded. I told you. The man said they were magic. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then his mother shook her head and turned away. It doesn't matter. We can't eat it. We can't sell it. It's useless. But Jack couldn't tear his eyes away from the beanstalk. Something about it called to him, a pull he couldn't explain. He took a step closer, then another. Before he realized it, he was gripping one of the vines, his foot on a low branch. Jack. His mother called sharply. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to see where it leads," he said, his voice firm. "Are you mad? You don't know what's up there. It could be dangerous." Jack hesitated. She was right, of course. But something deep inside him told him this was important, that this was his chance to change everything. "I have to try," he said, and with that, he began to climb. The ascent was harder than Jack had expected. The beanstalk's vines were sturdy, but they swayed slightly in the wind, and his arms and legs ached from the effort. Still, he pushed on, driven by a strange combination of curiosity and determination. As he climbed higher, the village below grew smaller and smaller until it looked like a child's toy set. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the village faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird perched on the vines. Hours seemed to pass, though Jack couldn't be sure. Time felt different up here, as if the beanstalk existed in its own world. Just when his arms felt like they couldn't hold on any longer, he broke through the clouds. What he saw took his breath away. Jack pulled himself onto a soft, grassy surface and lay there for a moment, catching his breath. When he finally looked up, he found himself in a place unlike anything he had ever imagined. The sky above was a deep, vibrant blue, and the clouds stretched out like an endless white sea. In the distance, towering above the landscape, was a massive castle made of gleaming white stone. Its turrets seemed to touch the sky itself, and its windows sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. Jack stood, his exhaustion forgotten. The ground beneath his feet was soft and springy, like moss, and strange flowers with glowing petals dotted the landscape. A faint, sweet scent filled the air. As he took a step forward, he noticed something else, a faint rumbling, almost like distant thunder. It came from the direction of the castle, growing louder with each step he took. Jack approached the castle cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. The structure was even more enormous up close, its front door towering over him like a mountain. The door was slightly ajar, and Jack peered inside. The first thing he noticed was the size. Everything was oversized: the tables, the chairs, even the cooking pots hanging over a massive fireplace. Jack felt like a mouse in a world built for giants, but it wasn't just the size that caught his attention. The castle was filled with treasures, piles of gold coins, glittering jewels, and strange objects that seemed to hum with magical energy. Jack's eyes widened. If he could take even a small part of this treasure back to the village, it would be enough to change his and his mother's lives forever. Before he could take a step inside, a deep, booming voice echoed through the castle, sending a chill down his spine. "Fee-fi-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." Jack froze. The rumbling sound he had heard earlier was growing louder, and now it was accompanied by the heavy thud of footsteps. "Giants," Jack whispered to himself, his heart racing. He turned and ran, diving behind a stack of golden coins just as a massive figure entered the room. The giant was enormous, with thick arms and legs like tree trunks, and a face that seemed carved from stone. He sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring, and frowned. Jack held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had come here searching for a way to save his family, but now he wasn't sure if he would make it out alive. Jack's breath came in shallow gasps as he crouched behind the pile of golden coins. The room seemed to vibrate with each step, The giant took, the floor trembling beneath his enormous feet. The giant was massive, at least 20 feet tall, with a thick beard and sharp eyes that scanned the room. He wore a patchwork tunic of leather and fur, and his hands were the size of dinner plates. He sniffed the air again, his nostrils flaring. "I smell you, little one," the giant growled, his voice echoing through the enormous hall. "Come out, and I'll make it quick." Jack's heart pounded as he pressed himself tighter against the pile of coins. The faint scent of metal and dust filled his nose as he tried to remain completely still. He couldn't let the giant find him, not now. The giant moved closer, his massive boots clanging against the stone floor. He reached down and grabbed a handful of gold coins, letting them fall through his fingers like sand. His sharp eyes scanned the room, narrowing as he muttered to himself. Jack's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. The door was too far, and the giant was blocking the main path. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something, a smaller door at the far end of the hall, partially hidden behind a stack of treasure chests. It was now or never. The giant turned away for a moment, distracted by the sound of a faint clucking noise. Jack seized the opportunity. Moving as quietly as he could, he crept along the edge of the room, staying low to the ground. Each step felt agonizingly slow, and every creak of the floorboards made him wince. Fee-fi-fo-fum. The giant rumbled again, his voice low and menacing. "You can't hide forever, little thief." Jack bit his lip, his palms sweaty as he reached the smaller door. He pushed it open just enough to slip through, careful not to let it creak. The clucking sound grew louder, and Jack found himself in a smaller chamber filled with straw and wooden crates. In the center of the room was a large golden cage, and inside it sat a plump hen with shimmering golden feathers. The hen clucked softly, her head tilting as she regarded Jack with curious eyes. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just any hen, this was the legendary golden hen he had heard about in bedtime stories as a child. The hen that could lay eggs of solid gold. He stepped closer, his hands trembling. You're real," he whispered. The hen clucked again, as if in response. Just as Jack reached for the cage, a deafening roar shook the walls. "There you are." Jack spun around to see the giant standing in the doorway, his face twisted in fury. His enormous hand reached out, swiping at Jack, who barely managed to dive out of the way in time. The hen squawked in panic, flapping her wings as Jack scrambled to his feet. The giant's hand came down again, smashing a crate to splinters as Jack darted toward the cage. "You'll regret coming here, little thief," the giant bellowed, his voice booming like thunder. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't leave the hen behind. It was his one chance to save his family. But he couldn't fight the giant either. He needed a plan. "Think, Jack, think," he muttered to himself as the giant's heavy footsteps shook the ground. His eyes darted around the room, landing on a coil of thick rope hanging from the wall. An idea began to form. Jack grabbed the rope and looped it through the top of the golden hen's cage, creating a makeshift harness. He threw the loop over his shoulder and heaved, gritting his teeth as he lifted the cage. The hen squawked indignantly, but didn't resist. The giant reached for him again, but Jack was already moving. He sprinted toward the door, the cage bouncing against his back. The giant roared, his footsteps thundering behind Jack as he barreled through the halls of the castle. Jack didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. All he could think about was the beanstalk and getting home. Jack burst through the castle's massive doors, the sunlight blinding him for a moment. He didn't stop. With the golden hen's cage still slung over his shoulder, he ran toward the edge of the clouds where the beanstalk waited behind him. The giant's roars grew louder. "Come back here, thief!" Jack reached the beanstalk and hesitated for only a second before grabbing hold of the nearest vine. He began his descent as quickly as he could, the hen squawking in protest. The beanstalk swayed under his weight, and Jack's hands burned as he slid down the vines. The golden cage was heavy, but he clung to it tightly. Below him, the ground seemed impossibly far away, but he didn't stop. The giant's voice boomed above him. "You can't escape me, boy. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth." Jack looked up and saw the giant leaning over the edge of the clouds, his massive hand gripping the top of the beanstalk. The giant began to climb down after him, his weight causing the entire stalk to creak and sway. Jack's feet finally touched solid ground, and he wasted no time. Dropping the golden hen's cage, he grabbed the axe that leaned against the side of the cottage. His mother ran out of the house, her eyes wide with shock. "Jack, what's going on? What is that?" "No time to explain," Jack shouted. The giant's enormous figure began to emerge from the clouds, his hand reaching for the lower vines. Jack raised the axe and swung with all his might, chopping at the base of the beanstalk. The wood splintered with each strike, and the beanstalk began to shudder. The giant roared in fury as he realized what was happening. "No, stop!" With one final swing, the beanstalk cracked and toppled, crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. The giant let out a final roar before disappearing into the clouds above. Jack collapsed onto the ground, panting. The golden hen clucked softly in her cage, as if thanking him. His mother knelt beside him, her face a mixture of fear and relief. What happened up there?" she asked. Jack looked at the golden hen and then at the broken remains of the beanstalk. "It's a long story," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips for the first time in what felt like forever. Jack felt hope. The golden hen was just the beginning. There was still more to discover, more to achieve. But for now, he was safe, with the beanstalk destroyed and the golden hen safely in their possession. Jack and his mother's lives were about to change forever. But not all changes bring ease. Sometimes new challenges emerge where old ones fade. The next morning, the golden hen clucked softly in her cage as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the cottage's small windows. Jack, still sore from the events of the previous day, sat at the wooden table with his mother. Both of them stared at the golden egg sitting in front of them, its surface gleaming like sunlight trapped in metal. Jack's mother reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing against the egg. "It's real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This will save us, Jack. This egg alone is worth more than everything we've ever owned." Jack nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. "The man wasn't lying," he said. "The beans were magic. And if that castle exists, there might be more treasures up there." His mother's eyes snapped to his. "Don't even think about it. You barely made it back alive, Jack. Whatever's up there isn't meant for us. You've done enough." "But Mother, no," she said firmly. "We have what we need now. Let's be grateful for that." Jack wanted to argue, but he saw the worry etched on her face. He sighed and nodded. "All right, I won't go back." It didn't take long for the villagers to notice the changes in Jack and his mother's lives. By the end of the week, their cottage had been repaired, new clothes hung on the line outside, and fresh bread baked in the oven. The golden hen's eggs, carefully sold one at a time, brought in more than enough money to keep them comfortable, but as their fortunes grew, so did the whispers. Did you hear? Jack sold a cow for magic beans, and now he's rich. They say he has a hen that lays golden eggs. It's unnatural, I tell you. Nothing good comes from magic like that. Jack ignored the gossip at first, but it became harder to avoid as the days passed. People stared at him when he walked through the market, their expressions a mix of curiosity, envy, and suspicion. One day, as Jack was returning home with a basket of bread, he was stopped by Farmer Tibbs, the burly man who had often turned him away when he asked for work. "Jack," Tibbs said, his tone gruff, "what's this I hear about magic beans and golden hens?" Jack hesitated. "It's true," he admitted, "but it's nothing to worry about. The hen's eggs are helping us get back on our feet. That's all." Tibbs narrowed his eyes. "Be careful, boy. Magic has a way of turning on those who use it. You do well to remember that." Jack walked away, a knee settling in his chest. That night, as Jack and his mother sat by the fire, the golden hen clucked louder than usual. She flapped her wings restlessly, her golden feathers gleaming in the firelight. "What's wrong with her?" his mother asked, frowning. Jack got up and opened the cage. The hen darted out, pecking at the floor and squawking. Jack followed her, watching as she moved toward the window and stared up at the sky. "She's acting strange," Jack said, his brow furrowing. His mother joined him by the window. "Do you think it's because of the giant?" Jack didn't answer, but the thought had already crossed his mind. Though the beanstalk was gone, he couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of the giant. The next morning, a knock at the door startled Jack and his mother. When Jack opened it, he found a man standing there, tall and lean, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. He wore a dark cloak that seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight. "Good morning," the man said, his voice smooth and polite. "My name is Elric. I've heard rumors about a hen that lays golden eggs. I'm a collector of rare and magical creatures." Jack's mother stiffened. "We're not selling the hen." Elric smiled, though there was something cold in his expression. "Oh, I'm not here to buy her. I simply wanted to see her for myself. May I?" Jack hesitated, but his mother stepped forward. "We don't show her to strangers. Please leave." Elric's smile faded, and for a moment, his eyes flashed with anger. But he quickly regained his composure. "Of course, I understand. Good day to you both." As he walked away, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Elric knew more than he was letting on. That night, Jack had a vivid dream. He was climbing the beanstalk again, but this time the sky above was dark and thunder rumbled in the distance. When he reached the top, the castle was in ruins, and the giant's voice echoed in his ears. "You stole from me, boy," the voice boomed. "You think you've won, but you've only begun a battle you can't win." Jack woke with a start, his heart pounding. He sat up and looked out the window, half expecting to see the giant descending from the clouds. But the night was quiet, and the sky was clear. Still, the dream left him unsettled. Over the next few days, tension in the village grew. Jack noticed more people watching him when he walked through town, their eyes filled with suspicion. Some even crossed the street to avoid him, muttering under their breath. One evening, as he returned home, he found a note nailed to the door. Magic is a curse, not a gift. Beware the price you'll pay. Jack showed the note to his mother, who paled as she read it. This isn't just about the villagers, Jack, she said. Someone else knows about the hen. Someone dangerous, the golden hen, who had laid an egg every morning without fail, suddenly stopped. For 3 days, she refused to lay, her clucking quieter than usual. Jack and his mother tried everything, feeding her, cleaning her cage, even speaking to her gently, but nothing worked. "I think she's scared," Jack said one evening, watching the hen huddle in the corner of her cage. "Of what?" his mother asked. Jack didn't have an answer, but deep down, he knew the peace they had found was temporary. Something was coming, and he had to be ready. This chapter focuses on Jack's decision to return to the giant's realm. Motivated by new threats and the mysterious stranger, Elric, Jack realizes that merely cutting down the beanstalk has not ended his problems. He must take action to protect his family and uncover the secrets of the castle. The golden hen clucked weakly in her cage, her once bright feathers appearing dull. Jack sat beside her, a mixture of worry and frustration gnawing at him. She still hadn't laid an egg, and each passing day deepened his unease. What if she's cursed? Jack muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. His mother, stirring a pot of stew nearby, frowned. "Jack, stop worrying. She's probably just tired." Animals aren't machines, but Jack wasn't convinced. The golden hen had been a miracle, a beacon of hope after years of struggle. Now her silence felt like an omen. That evening, as Jack was gathering firewood, he saw a shadow move among the trees near the edge of their farm. He straightened, his heart pounding. "Who's there?" he called out. Elric stepped into view, his dark cloak blending with the shadows. His blue eyes gleamed in the fading light. "Good evening, Jack," Elric said, his tone smooth as ever. "I trust you're taking good care of your golden hen." Jack tightened his grip on the bundle of wood in his arms. "What do you want?" Elric smiled faintly. "I told you before, I'm a collector of rare creatures. The hen belongs to my collection, and I intend to take her." "You can't have her," Jack said firmly. "She's mine." Elric's smile disappeared. "Do you really think you can protect her from everyone who'll come for her?" "From me?" Jack felt a surge of anger. "I'll do whatever it takes." Elric studied him for a moment, then sighed. "You're brave, I'll give you that. But bravery alone won't save you." He turned and disappeared into the trees, his parting words hanging in the air. "Sooner or later, the giant's realm will come calling. And when it does, you'll wish you had given me the hen." Jack returned home, his mind racing. Elric's words had reignited his curiosity about the giant's castle. What other secrets were hidden up there? What other dangers awaited? That night, Jack asked his mother about the castle. "Do you know anything about it?" he asked. "The giant's home?" She hesitated, her hands pausing mid-stitch. "When I was young, there were stories. They said the castle belonged to a powerful family of magicians who ruled the skies. But when the giants came, they destroyed everything. No one knows what's left up there now." Jack leaned forward. "What if there's something up there that could help us? Something to protect the hen?" His mother shook her head. "Jack, you're not going back. The beanstalk is gone, and we don't need any more trouble." But Jack couldn't stop thinking about it. If the golden hen was only the beginning, what else might he find in the castle? Determined to find answers, Jack retrieved the pouch of beans from his room. He still had 3 left, each one shimmering faintly in the light, standing in the moonlit field. Jack dug a small hole and dropped one of the beans into the earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground began to rumble, and a familiar green stalk shot up toward the sky. The beanstalk grew rapidly, twisting and coiling as it pierced the clouds. Jack stared up at it, a mix of awe and apprehension washing over him. "I'm going back," he said to himself. Jack didn't tell his mother about the new beanstalk. Instead, he spent the next day gathering supplies: bread, water, a sturdy rope, and his father's old knife. He also checked on the golden hen, who seemed more restless than ever. Before dawn the next morning, Jack left a note for his mother on the kitchen table: "I'll be back soon. Don't worry." He glanced back at the cottage one last time before climbing the beanstalk. When Jack emerged above the clouds, the sight of the castle took his breath away. The enormous structure loomed in the distance, its golden spires glinting in the sunlight, but this time the air felt different. The once vibrant clouds were gray and heavy, and a strange silence hung over the landscape. Jack approached the castle cautiously, his knife in hand. As he crossed the massive stone bridge leading to the entrance, he noticed something new. The castle gates were partially open, and faint whispers drifted out. Inside, the castle was eerily quiet. The grand hall, once filled with treasure, now looked ransacked. Piles of gold lay scattered, and the air smelled faintly of smoke. Jack's footsteps echoed as he moved deeper into the castle. He passed the room where he had found the golden hen, now empty and cold. "Where is everything?" he muttered. Then he heard a low growl that sent a chill down his spine. Jack froze as a massive shadow appeared at the end of the corridor. At first, he thought it was the giant, but as the figure stepped into the light, he realized it was something else entirely. A large wolf-like creature with glowing red eyes stared back at him, its fur bristling and its teeth bared. Jack tightened his grip on his knife. "All right," he said, more to himself than the creature. "Let's do this." The creature lunged, and Jack dove out of the way. The fight was chaotic, with Jack dodging and weaving as the creature snapped at him. Finally, he managed to loop his rope around its neck and tie it to a pillar. Breathing heavily, Jack stared at the subdued beast. "What are you guarding?" he asked aloud. The creature growled, its eyes narrowing, following the corridor. Jack stumbled upon a hidden door, partially concealed by a tapestry. Behind it was a small room filled with books, maps, and strange artifacts. On a pedestal in the center of the room sat a glowing orb, its surface swirling with light. Jack reached out to touch it, but the moment his fingers brushed against it, a vision filled his mind. He saw the giant's face, twisted in rage. He saw Elric standing in the clouds, his cloak billowing as he summoned a dark force. And he saw himself holding the orb, standing at the heart of the castle. Jack pulled his hand away, breathing hard. What is this? In this chapter, Jack begins unraveling the mystery of the glowing orb, learning about its connection to the giant's castle, the magic of the beanstalk, and his own fate. Meanwhile, new dangers emerge as Jack discovers the true reason behind the giant's wrath and the role Elric plays in the unfolding drama. Jack stared at the glowing orb in the hidden room, its swirling light mesmerizing. His fingers hovered over it once more, hesitant but drawn by an unseen force. This thing, Jack whispered, gripping the edge of the pedestal. What is it? When he finally touched the orb again, His vision blurred, and a wave of images flooded his mind. He saw the castle as it once was, filled with life and laughter. Golden-winged creatures soared through the sky, and a powerful king and queen stood on the castle's balcony, but then the scene darkened. A massive storm swept across the clouds, and the giants came. They brought destruction, enslaved the magical creatures, and cursed the land. Finally, Jack saw a figure he recognized: Elric. The man stood beside the giants, his eyes glowing with the same light as the orb. Jack stumbled back, releasing the orb as his chest heaved. Elric! He's part of this? Before Jack could process what he'd seen, a voice echoed through the room. "You're not supposed to be here, boy." Jack spun around, his knife at the ready. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a tall, thin man with pale skin and sunken eyes. He wore tattered robes, and his long, bony fingers clutched a wooden staff. "Who are you?" Jack demanded. The man tilted his head, his gaze cold and calculating. "I am Malik, the last steward of this castle, or what's left of it." Jack lowered his knife slightly. "What happened here?" Malik's expression darkened. "The giants. They destroyed everything. The orb you touched is all that remains of the castle's power. It holds the essence of this land, the life force of its people." Jack frowned. "Then why was it left here? Why didn't the giants take it?" "They couldn't," Malik said. "The orb is protected by ancient magic, tied to the bloodline of the castle's rulers. Only someone connected to them can wield it." Jack's heart raced. "Why did it show me Elric? Who is he?" Malik's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Elric is a traitor. Once a trusted ally of the castle, he betrayed the royal family and helped the giants invade. He seeks the orb now, to claim its power for himself." As Malik spoke, a distant rumble echoed through the castle. Jack tensed. "The giant," Malik said grimly. "He knows you're here." Jack's stomach twisted. "I thought I killed him when I destroyed the Beanstalk." "Foolish boy," Malik snapped. "The giant is bound to this realm. Destroying the Beanstalk only delayed him. He will always return, driven by the curse placed upon him by the royal family." "What curse?" Jack asked. Malik's eyes gleamed. "The giant was once human, a servant of the castle. When he betrayed the royal family, they used the orb's magic to transform him into a monster and banished him to this realm. But their curse backfired. The giant grew stronger and more vengeful, and he returned to destroy them." Jack's mind reeled. "So, he's not just a monster. He's a man cursed by magic?" "Yes," Malik said. "And unless you stop him, he will destroy everything again." Jack stared at the orb, its light glowing faintly in the dim room. "If the orb is the key to stopping the giant, then I'll use it." Malik laughed darkly. "Do you think it's that simple? The orb's power is immense, but it comes at a price. Those who wield it are consumed by it. That's why the royal family sealed it away." Jack hesitated, but his resolve hardened. "If it's the only way to protect my family and the village, I'll take the risk." Malik stepped closer, his expression softening slightly. "There may be another way. The orb has the power to undo the curse. If you can use it to restore the giant to his human form, you might break the cycle of destruction." Jack considered Malik's words. "But if Elric gets the orb first, then he will unleash a darkness even greater than the giant," Malik said. Before Jack could respond, the castle trembled violently. A deep, guttural roar echoed through the halls, shaking the very walls. "He's here," Malik said, gripping his staff tightly. "You must act quickly." Jack grabbed the orb, its light flaring in his hands. He felt a surge of energy course through him, as though the orb were alive. "Go to the throne room," Malik said. "There, you'll find the altar where the orb's magic can be channeled. But be warned, the giant won't let you reach it." Easily, Jack nodded, his heart pounding. "I'll make it." As Jack made his way through the castle, the giant's footsteps echoed behind him, each one shaking the ground. The once familiar halls now felt like a labyrinth, the shadows stretching and twisting as if alive. The giant's voice boomed through the corridors. "You can't hide, thief. I'll crush you and take back what's mine." Jack gritted his teeth, clutching the orb tightly. He knew he couldn't outrun the giant forever. When Jack finally reached the throne room, it was as grand as he had imagined. Massive golden thrones sat at the far end, flanked by crumbling statues of the royal family. In the center of the room stood a raised altar, its surface engraved with intricate runes. Jack placed the orb on the altar, its light growing brighter. The runes began to glow, and the air hummed with energy, but before Jack could activate the altar, the giant burst into the room, his massive frame filling the doorway. "You thought you could escape me?" The giant growled, his eyes blazing with fury. Jack stood his ground, knife in hand. "I didn't come here to escape. I came to end this." The giant roared and charged, his footsteps shaking the ground. Jack dodged, narrowly avoiding a massive fist that cracked the stone floor. The battle was chaotic, with Jack using the room's pillars and debris to evade the giant's attacks. As he fought, the orb's light grew stronger, filling the room with a blinding glow. Desperate, Jack reached for the orb, its warmth surging through him as he held it aloft. He focused on the giant, remembering Malik's words about the curse. "Restore him," Jack whispered, his voice trembling. "End the curse." The orb's light exploded, engulfing the room. The giant let out a deafening roar, his massive form shrinking and shifting. When the light faded, a man lay on the floor where the giant had stood, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weary expression etched into his face. Jack stared in disbelief. It worked. The man who once was a giant groaned as he sat up, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the throne room. He had a rugged face with deep lines etched from years of torment. His once monstrous voice now came out as a soft rasp. Where am I?" he murmured, looking around in confusion. Jack stepped forward cautiously, keeping the orb close. "You were the giant, but the curse is broken. You're human again." The man's eyes widened as memories flooded back. "The curse. I remember. I betrayed the royal family. I let greed and jealousy consume me." He clenched his fists, shame written across his face. "I became a monster, and I deserve to be one." Jack hesitated before replying. "Maybe you did, but the past can't change. Right now, I need your help. The orb. It's still in danger." The man looked up, his expression hardening. "The orb? No one should touch it. Its power is too dangerous. I didn't have a choice," Jack said firmly. "And now someone worse is coming for it." The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the throne room. Jack and the former giant turned to see Elric standing in the doorway, his dark cloak billowing behind him. Well, Elric said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I leave you alone for a moment, Jack, and you managed to undo centuries of magic. Truly impressive. Jack gritted his teeth, stepping in front of the orb protectively. Stay back, Elric. I know what you've done. You helped destroy this castle. You betrayed the royal family. Elric raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. Betrayed? Such a harsh word. I prefer to think of it as progress. The royal family were fools, hoarding their magic and keeping it locked away. I merely opened the door for a new era. The former giant stood, his imposing height still evident even in human form. You unleashed destruction and death. The orb isn't yours to take. Elric's gaze flicked to the man, and his smile turned cruel. Ah, the once mighty giant, reduced to this pathetic form. How fitting! Elric extended his hand, and dark energy crackled around him. The orb in Jack's hands trembled, as if responding to his power. Give it to me, Jack, Elric said, his tone cold. You don't understand the forces you're meddling with. The orb belongs to me now. Jack tightened his grip. Over my dead body. Elric's eyes narrowed. If that's what you wish, with a flick of his wrist, Elric unleashed a wave of dark magic. Jack dove behind a pillar as the blast shattered part of the throne room, sending debris flying. The former giant roared, charging at Elric with surprising speed. Elric dodged effortlessly, his movements swift and calculated. You think you can stop me? Elric sneered. You're nothing without your monstrous strength. The giant-turned man swung a broken piece of a pillar at Elric, forcing him to retreat momentarily amid the chaos. Jack clutched the orb, its energy surging through him. He could feel its power growing stronger, almost overwhelming. Come on, think, Jack muttered to himself. How do I stop him? Then he remembered Malik's warning. The orb comes at a price. Jack glanced at the altar, where the runes still glowed faintly. He realized he might be able to channel the orb's power one last time, but it would cost him. Elric wants the orb's magic, Jack thought. But what if I destroy it before he can use it? The idea terrified him. The orb was the key to the castle's magic, and destroying it could have unimaginable consequences. But if it meant stopping Elric? Elric's magic flared as he pushed the giant-turned man to the ground. The fight was taking its toll, and Elric looked more dangerous than ever. You can't win, Elric shouted, his voice echoing. This power is mine by right. Jack stepped out from behind the pillar, holding the orb high. You want it, Elric? Come and take it. Elric's eyes locked onto the orb, a predatory gleam in his gaze. Brave words, boy. But you won't live to regret them. He unleashed another blast of magic, but Jack rolled out of the way just in time. He reached the altar and placed the orb back onto it, his hands trembling. Jack, what are you doing? The former giant shouted. Jack didn't answer. He pressed his hands to the runes, feeling the orb's energy pulse beneath his fingers. The room was bathed in light as the orb's power activated. Elric screamed, shielding his eyes from the blinding glow. No, Elric roared, his voice filled with fury and desperation. You can't destroy it. Jack gritted his teeth, the energy coursing through him like fire. He could feel the orb resisting, its magic trying to pull him in. End this, Jack whispered, his voice cracking. End the chaos. The light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. When the light faded, the throne room was silent. The orb was gone, its pedestal empty. The runes on the altar had dimmed, their power extinguished. Jack collapsed to his knees, his body weak and trembling. The former giant approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it," the man said softly. Jack looked up, his vision blurry. "Is it over?" Elric was nowhere to be seen, his presence erased along with the orb's magic. As dawn broke over the castle, Jack and the former giant stood at the edge of the clouds, looking out over the world below. "What now?" Jack asked. The man smiled faintly. "Now we rebuild. The orb's magic may be gone, but the world will survive without it. You proved that courage and hope are stronger than any curse." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in days. Jack finally returns to his village after the chaos in the castle. However, his journey is far from over. He must face the consequences of his actions and the new challenges that arise as he strives to rebuild what was lost. The story shifts towards themes of healing, forgiveness, and the future as Jack reflects on the lessons learned and the price of power. The journey back to the village was long and quiet. Jack, weary and drained, walked alongside the former giant now. Known as Gareth, who had been by his side through every battle, Gareth seemed a shadow of the man he once was. His eyes, though still holding the wisdom of years, now carried a deep sadness. The transformation from giant to human had not been kind to him. It was as though his past sins were etched into every step he took. "Are you sure you're all right?" Jack asked, glancing at Gareth. "I'll be fine," Gareth replied, his voice soft. "But I will never forget what I was, Jack. The giant I became." He trailed off, his gaze distant. "I can't undo that," Jack smiled faintly. "We all have our burdens to carry, but you've taken the first step by acknowledging it. That's more than most can say." Gareth nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Maybe, but redemption is not an easy road. I don't expect forgiveness for what I've done. I just hope to be better now." When Jack and Gareth finally reached the village, the familiar sights of his home brought a rush of emotions. The once bustling streets were now quieter, though there was a sense of peace in the air that hadn't been there before. The villagers had heard of Jack's victory over the giants, and they were waiting for him with cautious hope. "Jack," his mother called, rushing forward with open arms. "You're alive. We heard the Beanstalk was destroyed. We feared the worst." Jack embraced her, a wave of relief washing over him. "I'm fine, Mom. Everything's fine now." But as he pulled away, he noticed the worried expressions of the villagers. They had always known Jack as a boy who dreamed of greatness. But this time, they saw something different. Jack wasn't the same carefree boy who had left with the magic beans. He had changed in ways no one could quite understand. In the village square, the elders gathered, their faces etched with concern as Jack approached with Gareth by his side. "You've returned," Elder Rowan said, his voice stern but not unkind. "And with you, this man who was once a giant." Jack met the elder's gaze. "Gareth is no threat. The curse has been broken. He's human now." "Human, yes," Elder Rowan said. "But we cannot forget the destruction caused by the giants, or the betrayal that led to it." Gareth bowed his head. "I know, and I do not ask for your forgiveness, only that you allow me to prove myself, to make things right." The elder exchanged a look with the other villagers. After a tense silence, Elder Rowan nodded. "Redemption, like the road to peace, is long and hard. You may stay, Gareth, but know this. You are not entitled to forgiveness. You must earn it through your actions. Jack stepped forward, placing a hand on Gareth's shoulder. He will. I believe in him. That evening, as the sun set over the village, Jack found himself alone on a hill overlooking the valley. The air was crisp, and the stars were beginning to appear in the sky. He sat down, resting his hands on his knees, deep in thought. Jack thought about the orb, the power it had held, the destruction it had caused, and the price he had paid to destroy it. The magic had been immense, yet it had almost consumed him. He could still feel the after effects of its energy lingering in his bones, a constant reminder of the burden he had borne. What was it all for? Jack whispered to himself. His thoughts were interrupted when Gareth joined him on the hill. Sitting down beside him in silence, "I've been thinking," Jack said quietly. "I've done a lot of things that I thought were for the good of everyone. But now, I wonder if I really understood what I was doing. The price of power isn't something you can take lightly." Gareth nodded. "You've learned that lesson. Well, power without wisdom is a dangerous thing." Jack sighed. "And yet, there's still so much left to do. The giants are gone, but there are other dangers in the world, other powers to reckon with." Gareth looked at the stars, his eyes reflecting a kind of weariness that matched Jack's own. "But you've grown, Jack. You've seen what happens when we chase power without understanding its true cost. That knowledge will guide you. The world doesn't need more heroes seeking glory. It needs people who know how to protect and heal." The next morning, Jack and Gareth visited the village square. The people were going about their daily routines, but there was a new sense of unity in the air. They had witnessed Jack's bravery, and they were beginning to see that the boy who had once been consumed by his desire for greatness had come back a different person. "I don't think I can ever go back to being the boy I was," Jack said to Gareth, watching the villagers. "But maybe that's not a bad thing." "It's not," Gareth replied. "You don't have to be the hero of a story to make a difference. Sometimes the real heroes are the ones who quietly build and protect." Jack smiled, feeling the weight of his past begin to lift. "Then maybe that's what I'll do." As the day passed, Jack and Gareth worked with the villagers to repair the damage left by the giants. Jack helped rebuild homes, while Gareth taught the younger villagers the skills he had once learned as a soldier. Slowly but surely, the village began to heal, both physically and emotionally. That evening, the villagers held a small celebration in Jack's honor, though he was quick to deflect any praise. He stood at the center, surrounded by familiar faces, his heart full, but his mind at peace. "I'm not the hero you think I am," Jack said to the villagers. "I only did what I had to. But together, we've rebuilt what was lost." The villagers cheered, but Jack's thoughts drifted to the future. He didn't know what the coming days would hold, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face them. As the celebration wound down, Jack and Gareth stood on the outskirts of the village, looking at the horizon. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jack knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. "There's a lot more out there," Jack said, gesturing to the open road. "Maybe there are more adventures waiting for us." Gareth smiled. "Maybe. But whatever happens, we'll face it together." Jack nodded. Together, and as they looked toward the future, both men understood that while the past could never be fully erased, the future was theirs to shape. As Jack adjusts to life in his village after the battle with the giants, he faces the challenge of assuming a new role in his community. While he once dreamed of adventure, now he must navigate the responsibilities of leadership, learning what it truly means to protect and guide those he loves. This chapter focuses on Jack's growth as he begins to step into the role of a protector, a mentor, and a symbol of hope for his people. It had been weeks since Jack's return to the village, and the pace of life had gradually returned to normal. People were working together to rebuild their homes and restore the sense of community that had been disrupted. Jack, however, could not shake the feeling that his journey was not yet over. He had always imagined himself as the brave adventurer, the one who would venture into dangerous lands and return as a hero. But the true weight of responsibility was different from the fame and glory he had once sought. People now looked to him not just for leadership, but for guidance. They saw him as a symbol of hope, a boy who had fought giants and survived, and who had returned to lead them through their darkest days. The first test of this new responsibility came one morning when a group of village elders called Jack to a meeting. "Jack," Elder Rowan began, his voice grave, "we need your help. There are rumors of strange happenings in the woods to the north. Some travelers have gone missing, and others have reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the trees." Jack listened carefully, his mind already racing. He had learned a great deal about the dangers of unchecked magic and dark forces in the world, but this new threat felt different. "We need you to investigate," Elder Rowan continued. "You have experience with what lurks in the unknown." Jack nodded slowly. "I'll gather a group and see what I can find. But we must be cautious. We don't know what's out there." The days leading up to Jack's journey were filled with preparation. As the village's unofficial leader, he had to ensure the safety of the people and organize the search. Though he had come to value his quieter life, the memories of adventure still tugged at him. Jack stood on the edge of the village one evening, looking out at the dense forest that lay beyond. His heart beat with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His role had changed. He was no longer just a boy seeking glory. Now he was a protector. It was no longer just about him. It was about the people who depended on him. "Jack," came a voice behind him. He turned to see Gareth approaching, his face as serious as ever. "I heard about your plans to head into the woods," Gareth said, his tone low. "I want to come with you." Jack shook his head. "I appreciate it, but this isn't your fight. You've earned your rest. The village needs you here." "I'm not resting until I've redeemed myself," Gareth replied firmly. "You've taught me that redemption is earned through actions, not words. Let me come with you. I owe it to you and to the village." Jack studied Gareth for a moment. He could see the determination in his eyes. Despite everything Gareth had gone through, he was committed to making up for his past, and Jack could sense the sincerity in his voice. "All right," Jack finally said. "We leave at dawn." The next morning, Jack and Gareth set out with a small group of villagers. They were prepared for a journey into the wilderness, though the atmosphere was tense. The woods to the north were known for their thick foliage and strange occurrences, but nothing had ever been this serious before. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and the sunlight filtered through the trees in eerie shafts. The once familiar forest now seemed foreign, as if something had changed in its heart. "We've gone further than we've ever dared before," one of the villagers, Alina, whispered. "What do you think is out here, Jack?" Jack squinted. "Through the trees." "I don't know, but we'll find out." They continued their trek, but the deeper they went, the more unsettled they became. The usual sounds of birds and animals were absent. Instead, An unnatural silence had settled over the forest. Every footstep felt heavier, and the group kept close together, their nerves frayed. As they reached a clearing, Jack felt a sudden chill. He motioned for the group to stop. "Something's wrong," he murmured. His eyes scanned the surroundings, and he saw nothing at first, only the twisted shapes of ancient trees and shadows that seemed to shift unnaturally. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Jack spotted movement, a flicker of shadow crossing the clearing. Before he could react, the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around them, blocking out the sun. "Stay close!" Jack shouted. Drawing his sword, Gareth stepped forward, his stance ready. "What are we dealing with?" "I don't know," Jack answered, his heart racing. "But we need to stay together. Whatever it is, we can face it." The darkness in the clearing intensified, and figures began to emerge from the shadows, tall, thin shapes with glowing eyes that glimmered in the darkness. They seemed to have no distinct form, but they moved with eerie precision, circling the group. One of the villagers screamed as a shadowy figure reached out, its hand passing through the air as though it was made of smoke. The figure seemed to drain the life from the villager, causing them to collapse to the ground. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. These were no ordinary creatures. They were phantoms of some kind, their forms flickering in and out of existence like smoke. "We need to fight back," Gareth shouted, swinging his sword at one of the creatures. But his sword passed right through it, accomplishing nothing. "Magic!" Jack shouted. "It's magic we're dealing with. These creatures aren't physical." He raised his hand, channeling the remnants of the orb's power, the only magic he still had access to. A blast of energy shot out, striking one of the figures, but it only caused a brief flicker. The shadow reformed unharmed. "We need to break their connection to the magic that's keeping them here," Jack said, thinking quickly. "There must be something at the heart of the forest that controls them." Jack and Gareth led the group through the shadows, fighting off the phantoms with the remnants of Jack's magic. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the heart of the forest, a dark ancient stone circle covered in moss and inscribed with runes. "The heart of the forest," Gareth whispered, his voice filled with awe and fear. "Whatever magic is controlling these creatures, it's coming from here," Jack said, his eyes scanning the runes. "We need to break the spell." With a deep breath, Jack stepped forward, placing his hand on the stones. The air around him grew colder, and the runes glowed faintly. He could feel the pulse of dark magic radiating from the stones. It was ancient and powerful, more potent than anything he had encountered before. Jack closed his eyes, focusing on the magic within him. The power he had once wielded through the orb now surged in him with a sense of urgency. He was no longer the boy who sought adventure for its own sake. Now he was the protector of his village, and it was his duty to protect it from whatever darkness threatened it. With a final push, Jack released all the magic he had, pouring it into the stones. The earth shook, and the shadows that had surrounded them screeched in pain. The runes flared brightly, then shattered, sending a shockwave through the clearing. The phantoms screamed as they disintegrated, their forms fading into nothingness. The forest fell silent once more. The unnatural darkness lifted, and the sunlight returned, casting warm rays across the clearing. "We did it," Jack said, panting with exhaustion. "We did," Gareth replied, a hint of relief in his voice. Jack looked around at the villagers, who had survived the ordeal, and felt a surge of pride. His people were safe. The danger had been vanquished, but he also knew that this was only the beginning of his new role. road ahead would be long, but he was ready for it after Jack's victory over the shadowy creatures. Peace seems to return to the village, but a new chapter begins in Jack's life as a leader. This chapter focuses on Jack's efforts to rebuild the village in the aftermath of the battle, the challenges he faces as he steps into his leadership role, and the growing understanding that true leadership is not about glory but service to others. He must learn to balance strength with compassion, trust with responsibility, and personal desires with the needs of his people. The morning after their victory, the village was filled with a renewed sense of peace. The sunlight shone brightly through the trees, and the villagers began their daily work with a newfound sense of gratitude. The shadowy figures were gone, and the fear that had gripped the village seemed to have vanished along with them. But Jack knew that while the threat had been eliminated, his role in the village was just beginning. The battle had not only tested his strength, but had also made him realize the depth of his responsibility. He wasn't the same boy who had once been eager to chase after adventure and glory. Now, he had a new role to play. That afternoon, Jack gathered the villagers in the square. As they gathered around, Jack stood before them, feeling the weight of their eyes upon him. "We've been through a lot together," Jack began, his voice steady but filled with humility. "But our work is far from done. Our village is rebuilding, and we have much to do. I can't do this alone. We must work together to make sure our home remains safe, strong, and prosperous." The villagers nodded in agreement, but Jack could see the lingering uncertainty in their eyes. They had seen him as a boy who had once sought glory, but now they were beginning to see the man who was ready to lead. Over the next few weeks, Jack focused on reorganizing the village's defenses. Though the shadowy creatures had been driven back, Jack knew that there were still many dangers in the world. The peace they had was fragile, and it was up to him to ensure that the village was prepared for whatever might come next. Gareth, having earned the villagers' trust through his actions, became Jack's right-hand man. Together, they worked to build new fortifications, clear the forests of any lingering threats, and train the villagers in self-defense. It was hard work, but it was necessary. The village had been vulnerable for too long. "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be working side by side with you, Gareth," Jack said one evening as they inspected the perimeter of the village. Gareth grinned. "Neither did I, Jack. But we've both changed, haven't we? I was once a giant, terrorizing these lands. Now I'm helping rebuild them." Jack nodded, a thought crossing his mind. It's not just about rebuilding walls or fortifications, though. It's about rebuilding trust. Trust in each other, and trust in ourselves. Gareth's smile faded slightly, but he seemed to understand. "You're right, and that's the hardest part. It's easier to build something with stone than with people." Jack was quiet for a moment. "It will take time, but I believe in the people here. They've already shown me that they're willing to fight for this place, just like I am." As the weeks went on, Jack found himself struggling with a growing sense of doubt. Despite his victories, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had led his people to safety from the shadowy creatures, and they were now rebuilding their homes. But Jack felt as though there was something deeper he needed to understand. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack found himself alone on a hill overlooking the village. The stars above were bright, but his heart felt heavy. Gareth joined him, sensing the unease in Jack's demeanor. "What's on your mind?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Jack said, his voice distant. "I fought battles, led people, and protected this village. but it still doesn't feel like enough. I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing. Gareth sat down beside him. You're doing more than enough. It's not always about grand victories. Sometimes it's the small steps that make the biggest difference. The village is safe because of you. The people trust you. And that's something not many leaders can say. Jack sighed, staring out at the village. I guess I just feel like I should be doing more. There's so much more I could accomplish. But I don't know where to begin. Maybe you don't need to figure it all out at once, Gareth said gently. Sometimes the greatest leaders are the ones who don't have all the answers. They learn along the way, and they never stop caring for their people. Jack was silent for a long time, taking in Gareth's words. Slowly, he began to feel the weight of his doubts lift, if only slightly. Maybe he didn't have to have everything figured out immediately. Maybe leadership was about growing, learning, and evolving just as he had done in the past. The next morning, Jack woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that leadership was not about achieving perfection, but about being there for others, understanding their struggles and helping them through it. As he walked through the village, he saw people working side by side, and he realized that the heart of leadership wasn't in commands or strategies, it was in connection. One day, Jack stopped by the smith's forge, where Alina was working. She was hammering away at a piece of metal, sweat glistening on her brow. Jack leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "You've been at this for hours," Jack said, concerned. "Are you all right?" Alina looked up, surprised. "I'm fine, Jack. Just busy. There's a lot to do." "You've been pushing yourself," Jack said gently. "Remember, we're all in this together. You don't have to carry the weight alone." Alina smiled, though it was a weary smile. "I know, Jack. It's just, there's so much to do. I feel like I need to keep going, keep working." "I get it," Jack said, stepping inside. "But sometimes the most important thing we can do is rest. You're no good to anyone if you burn yourself out." Alina looked at him thoughtfully. "You're right. I guess I've been so focused on the work that I've forgotten to take a breath." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this together. Just take it one step at a time." As the days passed, Jack's leadership continued to grow. He learned to balance the needs of his people with the work that needed to be done. He learned that true leadership was not about seeking glory or proving one's worth. It was about serving others, listening to their needs, and working with them to create a better future. One evening, Jack gathered the villagers for a meeting. In the square, he stood before them, looking out at their faces that had trusted him, fought with him, and believed in him. "We've come a long way," Jack began, his voice steady. "But we're not done yet. We've rebuilt our homes, and we've faced threats together. But I want us to think about what comes next. We can't just survive. We need to thrive." The villagers nodded, their attention focused on Jack. "I want to build a community where everyone has a role, where we all have the opportunity to grow. It won't be easy, but together, I know we can make this village stronger than ever." There was a pause, and then the villagers began to cheer, their faces lighting up with hope.